your local radio station.
Senedd Talk Radio.
It's Friday, May the 7th. Welcome along to our coverage of the Senedd Elections 2021. Joining me in the studio today is Gwenoro Jones, former MP for Carmarthenshire and our political analyst. We'll be bringing you all the results as they come in, along with interviews with the candidates involved in the election process.
Your stories, your platform. This is Senedd Talk Radio.
Welcome along. My name's Alan Evans. This is Senedd Talk Radio. Welcome back to Senedd Elections 2021. This is the day of the count. We find out who represents us as a government in Cardiff Bay. Gwenoro, people have questioned the Cardiff-centric powerhouse, the Cardiff bubble. Some, we heard now, Neil Hamilton speaking to us there, describing it as a puppet, really, a lapdog for Westminster. Not really worth having. Get rid of the Assembly, the politicians, and so on. Some want regional assemblies, regional parliaments, more power for local authorities, even the doubling of members of the MSs, as Helen Mary Jones and Plaid Cymru are asking for. How do you see the future of this Cardiff hold?
Well, whether it is true or not, that is the strong perception the Welsh people have, that it is too Cardiff-centric. I have taken that view. I've never been a member, so I cannot comment on what goes on in the inner circles. But that's how it comes over. And also, for what Neil Hamilton says, he says something quite interesting, you see, where I have observed this. There's limited chance for members of the Senedd to make speeches or raise local issues. That's what I find it difficult to see the place as a debating place.
Yeah, he said a couple of seconds, wasn't he? Or about half a minute or something.
Yeah, in Westminster, at the end of every day, there's an adjournment debate raised by a backbencher about a problem in their constituency. Now, there's nothing like that in Wales. What we need to do is, first of all, strengthen the role of the members of the Senedd within the decision-making process. And I don't mean just being members of a committee, have a real impact on the debating of what goes on. There is far too much control, as I said much earlier in the whole programme. No, I think we need regional, almost like regional assemblies within Wales, which is absurd, mind. Because Wales is a small country. You've got to remember that. West Midlands County Council is bigger than Wales. We need to get it into perspective when we say it's only been 180 miles from north to south. Okay? We've got to keep a balance on all this. But I would like to see more involvement of the northwest, northeast, more strategic involvement in the regions of Wales. That's number one. Certainly citizens' assemblies. Certainly people's assemblies. That's another one that we need to strengthen and develop. We need more people participation, as I keep on saying. That is why only half the people of Wales vote. That is why probably 3/4 of the people of Wales are not too interested in what goes on in the body. We need to get people more involved. And that means the Senedd itself changing its ways of working.
So If Plaid Cymru get it, well, even with the coalition, Neil Hamilton was saying there that they're a cheap date. They're not going to get very much in return from Mark Drakeford. Do you think then that Plaid should look at going with the Conservatives and the other parties? If you want something to change, you've got to compromise, haven't you? You've got to sort of almost jump into bed with the devil, haven't you?
Yeah, well, as I said, there was an attempt made at it in 2007, which almost succeeded, between Plaid Conservatives and Welsh Lib Dems. All the stories seem to be different as to what happened. Mike German for the Lib Dems apparently got cold feet. Plaid Cymru were causing problems inside the party for the leader and whatever. But at the end of the day, I don't see that sort of thing happening again, because that was pre-Brexit. You know, the Tory party, when Plaid in 2007 tried to get into bed with them, that's a different Tory party to the party of today. The Tories of 2007 in Wales did believe in devolution. They did want to make the devolution package work. Now, Andrew R.T. Davies doesn't come over to me as a man who 100% has got his interest in the development of the Welsh Assembly. He's got his eye all the time on Westminster politics and its involvement in Wales. So I think the days of, after the EU referendum, the days of Plaid and the Tories working together is pie in the sky. It's never going to happen. And certainly not with the Welsh Lib Dems, who's a very strong pro-European party. So the only option for Plaid and Labour is to work together. And by the way, there is a lot, if you look at their manifestos, there is a lot of common ground between the two parties, a lot. And it is not beyond the bounds of possibility that they could do a programme like the One Nation programme or the One Government programme that Rhodri Morgan and Ieuan Wyn-Jones did in 2007. I see a lot of similarities. There's far more detail in Plaid Cymru's manifesto than the Labour one, but there are many areas where there's a lot of common agreement already before the result.
Okay, well, we've been on air now for 4 hours and 46 minutes this morning doing this election special, The Count. Stay with us, some more great music to come. The pandemic will have a long-term impact on spending, economy, jobs, education, mental health, NHS waiting times, and more. How and will Wales recover, Gwynoro?
It's going to be a long job. If anyone thinks that in a year's time, or even 2 years' time, things will be back to normal, maybe socially, between us people talking around and walking around, it will be back to normal. But economically, industrially, in the cities, in the towns, in the villages, things are going to be difficult for a long time. I think Mark Drakeford said the other day something which was brave to say during a campaign, but at least he was 100% honest. It's going to take this coming Parliament of 4 or 5 years to get over the pandemic. And when you look at a wider scale in Britain, just think of it. We had £2 trillion in the red. 2 trillion. The amount of money the government has poured at, quite rightly, has poured at everything during this pandemic. Somewhere along the line, it has to be paid back, not immediately, but over a few years. Now, everyone knows, but by 2023, when I say everybody who studies these things, in 2023, tax rises are inevitable. A change situation is coming. So therefore, I think where the Labour Party was wise in their manifesto, there were very few financial commitments. Why? Because the financial situation is so precarious, it is so difficult, and what is ahead, God knows. The economy, they're saying, is going to improve by 6-7% this year. And they're saying that's the best increase since the 1940s. True, but last year it fell by 9%, the worst in 300 years. In 300 years. So therefore, yes, obviously, when we come from such a low base, there is going to be a recovery. There will be a better economic performance. But in public expenditure terms, and the Prime Minister's aim for a levelling up in Britain, I tell you, it's going to take years upon years upon years. And the recovery economically, equally, will take at least 5 years, in my judgment. At least.
Well, that's great. We've, your knowledge really is quite astonishing, and the research you do for a program like this is quite amazing, really. So thank you very much in advance. At the end of the show, we've been on here now for nearly 5 hours. We're going to speak to David Llewellyn, the Police and Crime Commissioner candidate, later on. He's been in post for quite some time. That's a role that was relatively new and has seen a lot of changes throughout Wales. But more music now, more messages in this song. This sums up sort of what the economy and what the recovery may be and what politics is all about. It's Delamitri and Nothing Ever Happens.
This is Llanelli Talk Radio. Your stories, your platform. This is Llanelli Talk Radio.
Welcome back to the studio. This is the day that we find out who will represent us as our government. The members of the Welsh Parliament, the MSs, get elected today. We should hear the results sort of late this evening, but although some are saying that the count may go on until tomorrow, we're not quite sure. We've been speaking to some politicians. We have David Llewellyn, the former Police and Crime Commissioner, speaking to us later on. We're also trying to get hold of Helen Mary Jones of Plaid Cymru as well. So stay with us. A little bit more music now, and we will be back shortly. Well, everybody does want to rule the world. And we have our first result in for Wales. Gwenora, tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, that's right. Montgomeryshire. It's not a surprise, really, because it's one of the Tories' strongholds, in a sense. Russell George has doubled his majority. His majority is now around 8,000. Some 6% increase in his vote. Plaid Cymru came second, 4,485. Lib Dems were third, 4,207. And Labour then 3,576. So a very comfortable victory for Russell George, doubling his majority. The Lib Dem vote collapsed, down by about 11%. Turnout was actually 50%. Slightly up on 2016. So there you have it. The first new Senedd member is Russell George.
There we go. So stay with us. We will be bringing you those results as and when they come in, and some of the intricacies of how they came about, the differences in last year's result, the last result, and the majorities and so on. So stay with us as we take you through the count, which determines who will govern in Wales in the Welsh Senedd, Welsh Assembly. What do you call it now? It's the Welsh Parliament I've been on. We've been on now 5 hours and 18 minutes, Gwenora. Can you believe it? It's a sort of a marathon political show for us here at Llanelli Talk Radio. We have Richie Havens coming up next, and then we're going to go to Helen Mary Jones and speak to her live at the count in Carmarthen. Hi there, Helen Mary Jones. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Alan. How are you?
That's great. Thanks for joining us live on our... We've been on 5 hours and 21 minutes, can you believe? We've spoken to many a politician and commentator across Wales. So it's been a wonderful day so far. I hope it's going well for you down there.
Well, it's very hard to tell, to be honest, Alan, because of the COVID regulations, obviously, and having to do everything socially distanced. We can any candidate and their team. The teams are much smaller, and we can only see a very small percentage of the papers as they're coming out of the boxes.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to pick up on what's going to happen. I mean, from what little we have seen, it's looking like another close result for Llanelli, but I can't claim that that's statistically significant.
Yeah. What do you make of pre-election, on election day, the queues, people saying they turned up, tried 2 or 3 times to vote and in the end gave up because there was only one booth in a marquee somewhere, a makeshift, voting station?
I think it was, this is an unprecedented election, isn't it? And I wouldn't want to criticise any of the arrangements because I know how difficult they have been to make. But if any elector has lost the opportunity to cast their vote, then that's obviously a matter of concern. And, given that we might be living with some version of COVID, hopefully not the levels of lockdown we've got now, but if that has happened, we'll then need to look at arrangements for the future to make sure that that's avoided.
There were discussions, I know, because I spoke to Mark Drakeford pre the election and said, would this time period be extended? Could, the votes for the MS, for instance, take 2 or 3 days to go through so people had the time to vote? But that didn't happen. It very much is business as usual, except that, there's stranger circumstances within the building where you are.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, as I say, I think the people making the arrangements had a very difficult job to do, and it may well be going forward that we will need to think of more creative ways of doing this. I mean, I've always thought that we need to think about how we can vote online. I mean, lots of organisations do that now. There are trade unions, for example, who hold their internal elections virtually or with a mixture because, voting online wouldn't suit everybody. But I think we do need to think of new ways of doing our democracy anyway, and COVID will, push us perhaps into some more of those.
Yeah, the results are coming in. The first result was declared in Montgomeryshire. Conservatives taking that one. Do you think the Conservatives are going to do quite well this time round?
I think it's difficult to say. I mean, we're not seeing much of that in the Senedd constituency, but as I say, we're only seeing a very, very small percentage of the papers as the box is opened. So, I can't say that that's statistically significant. I guess some of those seats in northeast of the country where they did well in the Westminster election, it'll be interesting to see if that's repeated. So it's a very interesting election in a very peculiar set of circumstances.
How much impact would that have on, do you think generally on people, the way people are voting? You weren't able to go doorstepping until the last couple of weeks, and you were sending out an awful lot of paperwork. Do you think people read that? Do you think people have listened and got your message?
I think it's been difficult, and for us in Cymru, it's particularly difficult. We always say that the big political parties, inevitably, Labour and the Conservatives, do better in the air war. They do better on the media because obviously they get the UK coverage as well as the local and the Welsh coverage. And where we are strong, and that's particularly true in the Senedd area, is on the doorstep with local volunteers listening to people and talking to people. I think it may be that the fact that we weren't able to get out and do that until very late in the game may make a difference to the result. We would normally have been knocking doors every weekend from the September before a Senedd election in the May, and of course, as you said, we've only had 3.5 weeks of being able to do that. So that may very well make a difference. But it remains to be seen, of course.
We've got Gwenoro Jones in the studio. I think he wants to ask you a question as well.
Yeah, Helen. Hi, Helen. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
I don't think we've ever spoken before. So, but it's nice to have a chat with you. How do you feel the campaign generally in Wales has gone on? We've spoken with one or two Plaid people who felt that maybe the independence line should have been pushed a bit stronger, like it has been in Scotland. What do you think on that?
Well, I think that we've probably got it about right. These things are always a matter of emphasis, but we've been upfront and clear that we think that Wales needs independence and that Wales needs independence in order to be able to deliver the kind of fair and just society that most people want to see. But we've also needed to talk about the bread and butter issues, about creating jobs after our economy is badly hit by COVID, about creating a national health and care service to look after people and to rebuild our health and care, about paying workers in the public sector fairly. So I think we've got it just about. I think we've got it just about right, but you'll never entirely please all of the people all the time on that.
That's right. That's certainly the case. Well, whether you'll be there or not, and let's see what happens.
Exactly.
The chances are going to be that to form a government, there will have to be some agreement between Labour and Plaid. What's your feeling on that? Would you be happy with such an arrangement, or?
Well, you wouldn't expect me to speculate on that before the results have come in. What I'm still hoping for is a Plaid Cymru government. If the people make another decision, that's the time when we'll need to consider those matters and see who else one could talk to. But it's too early yet.
Yes, but it is something that obviously every serious politician will think about. It's something that might have to be faced. For instance, there's a story coming out, I've just picked it up on BBC, that the both parties, which I assume to be Labour and yourselves, are thinking Leanne is going to lose her seat. Now, that will be a big blow, don't you think?
if that did happen, that would be a real blow to us, and it would be a real loss to the Senedd, because Leanne is a world-class politician and she served her community very well. But I really don't know how anybody can know that, because, as I was just saying to Alan, it's very difficult for us to be able to sample here. So I guess I'd say we won't know the results until the results happen, but I would be personally very sad indeed if the Senedd and if the Rhondda lost Leanne, and I think it would be a huge loss. But we don't, all of this is speculation at this stage.
We were speaking to Neil Hamilton earlier, and he said that Plaid Cymru, should this come about, the devolution, should the coalition come about, Plaid Cymru are an easy, cheap date, that you're not going to make too many demands. You'll go along with what's going on. That sort of resonate with you?
Well, you wouldn't expect me to comment on the comments of a discredited person who's been convicted of corruption. So I'm not really terribly interested in Neil Hamilton's views. I'm much more interested in the views of the people of Wales, to be honest.
And those views we've heard from people very clearly saying that they want to see some form of equality being restored between the fat cats, between the politicians, between the county council CEOs and so on, for the key workers, for the NHS. Giving them the price of a chicken per week really isn't cutting the mustard, is it? If you get in, will that change? Will we see these people being paid adequately?
We're committed to paying everybody who works in the public sector in Wales the real living wage. When it comes to care workers, particularly, we'd start, if Plaid's in government, we would pay all care workers immediately £10 an hour. And by the end of our term in office, we would have moved workers in care onto the same set of terms and conditions as workers in the health service, and raised the wages of the lowest paid in that joint National Health and Care Service. It's absolutely right, Alan. I met a lady in Tramsaran the other day whose daughter is a care worker, and that woman has to work 70 hours a week in order to be able to pay her bills and mortgage and look after her children. And that's criminal in this day and age. And a Plaid Cymru government would bring that to an end by paying people who work in care, one of the most important jobs in the country, after all, a real living wage.
Yeah. Good order?
Well, I was just listening to all that then. Do you think... Maybe, I don't know whether you've heard me say these things before. I've been very unhappy over the years as to the way the Senedd conducts its affairs. It doesn't seem to be... It seems pretty structured. It is not relaxed enough, open enough in its debates. Do you find that? Would you agree with that? Or do you think...
I don't think that that's true. I mean, I think there are some constraints on us that may not be in other parliaments, and one of the difficulties is the very small number of members means that we can't have committee meetings at the same time as you can have the Senedd itself sitting. So, I think with more members we might be able to have a bit more freedom. But I think that some people find the debates a bit boring because perhaps we don't disagree with each other for the sake of disagreeing with each other. And I think if you look at the Senedd's committee work, you'll see people taking very strong lines and not always sticking to the party line, and really challenging government ministers, and that from good government backbenchers as well as from opposition members. So I don't think I entirely agree with that characterisation.
No, I'm quite sure that at committee... Sorry, I'm quite sure at committee level there's a lot of input from the members. But I would have thought the debates themselves look a bit, stodgy. They're not lively, are they? You can't say Senedd debates are lively.
They sometimes are, and I think what I would say is it's very difficult to conduct a lively debate virtually. And I think that certainly has been a constraint on us in the last year. I'm very sorry, gentlemen, but you're going to have to forgive me.
Yes,
I know. Another interview scheduled now.
Thank you.
But thank you for doing this. And can I just say how much I appreciate, Alan, you doing this localised coverage of the count, because I think it's really important for people to be able to get that information.
No problem.
I really appreciate
Happy to be of service. Diolch yn fawr i gyd.
Your local radio station.
We are Senedd Talk Radio.